The word pharynx, it just means crossing. It's a fancy word for your throat. Um, it's a word that's very fitting because the throat is the place where the nasal cavity, representing the respiratory system, and the oral cavity, representing the digestive system, they come together. Usually, the pharynx can be divided into three distinct areas that have similar, yet ever so slightly different mucosa. The nasopharynx is technically part of the respiratory membrane, and it functions like we described. The mucosa in the nasal cavity functions, helps with warming and humidifying air. The oropharynx is the most keratinized of these places, owing to more exposure to the outside. And the oropharynx is specifically designed for taking in food and therefore has a different purpose. The laryngopharynx, though, continues with very specialized structures, such as your larynx and epiglottis, which are, again, officially part of the respiratory system. I am someone who suffers from post-nasal drip. And what happens pretty much all throughout the winter, there's mucus that's being created in my nasal cavity, and it is dripping down into my laryngopharynx and triggering a coughing reflex. So the solution is to blow my nose or to use a neti pot, which will flood my nasal cavity with this lusciously warm and salty solution that will clean out the mucus and reduce the inflammation. The mucosa of the nasopharynx, of course, more closely resembles the mucosa of the nasal cavity. The nasopharynx has that pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium designed to trap particulates. But as the nasopharynx transitions into the oropharynx, the mucosa becomes stratified squamous cells similar to the oral cavity, made for abrasion from a food bolus. And then, as we continue inferiorly, the oropharynx transitions into the laryngopharynx, and we come back again to pseudostratified ciliated columnar cells. Personally, I find this transition a little strange. For mucosa to transition, it takes a lot of cells in between to transition from columnar cells, as those found in pseudostratified columnar, and then simple squamous cells with probably over 50 layers of cells. So I feel like that's a big transition from one area to another. The larynx is quite a complicated organ. Most of us associate the larynx with our voice. Yes, the larynx is capable of producing sound as air gets routed through it. The larynx also holds an important role keeping the trachea open, especially as food slides down the esophagus located behind it. The structure of the larynx involves a bunch of cartilages, the most important of which is right here, the cricoid cartilage. You may know about this bone called the hyoid bone. It is the only bone in the human body that does not connect or articulate with any other bone. This bone, the hyoid, guards the epiglottis, which is the superior portion of the larynx and the primary place of vocalization. The epiglottis on this picture, which is a sagittal cut, is right here. It is these structures that form the Adam's apple. The epiglottis it's technically part of the laryngopharynx, but it actually plays more of a role in rooting food the correct way instead of making sound. So it's this little flap of elastic cartilage, and it's one of the few places in the body where we can find elastic cartilage. Remember, elastic cartilage looked very similar to hyaline cartilage, right? There were these big chondrocytes that were trapped in lacuna, and the background was all purple. In elastic cartilage, the background isn't a glassy background. It's a background that has some lightly stained scratches in it, resembling the elastic fibers. As food slides down the throat, as in the picture on the left here, the epiglottis moves inferiorly and it covers the trachea. So food just naturally forces the epiglottis into that position where it covers the trachea. When someone has smoke inhalation, we're certainly concerned about the damage to any part of their respiratory system, right? But along with smoke inhalation as like an irritant, also comes the inhalation of air that is essentially too hot for your respiratory mucosa. The epiglottis is one of the organs that can certainly be compromised by heat. During healing, the epiglottis might refuse to move inferiorly and cover the trachea when food is swallowed. We previously mentioned rhinitis as a condition that's affecting the nasal cavity. We also mentioned sinusitis, which is a condition affecting only those open sinus cavities in the bones. And there's also pharyngitis, which is just a simple sore throat. And the one that we've heard of most often having to do with the pharynx is laryngitis, which is a sore throat that specifically is affecting your laryngopharynx and your ability to use your vocal cords. Basically, with the upper respiratory system, it's all about the jitises. You can have all kinds of jitises.